Hi, this is Daniela Cambone. Welcome back to another edition of the Daniela Cambone Show here on ITM Trading. Some big action on the books for next week. North Korean leader Kim Jong Un and Russian President Vladimir Putin will be among more than 24 foreign leaders to attend China's massive military parade next week. The parade will be held on September 3rd and it is part of China's commemorations to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II following Japan's formal surrender. The announcement places Putin and Kim at the top of Xi's guest list, and it sets the stage for an extraordinary photo op with three autocratic leaders standing side by side. Joining me today to analyze and weigh the impact of this all is Gordon Chang, Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow. Gordon, always good to have your perspective on the show. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Daniela.
Curious to get your thoughts on this huge show of display that will take place September 3rd. How significant is it?
This is significant from a couple of different perspectives. First of all, everyone is looking at all the new military equipment that China will be showing off. China military analysts say that China always never shows off anything that isn't operational. So everything that we see, at least we're led to believe, is already in the inventory. A lot of people are looking at all sorts of stuff, especially that ultra-large unmanned underwater vehicle, which has been called an underwater ICBM. But there's a lot of other stuff that we are going to see. But really, I think people are going to be most fascinated by who and who is not on the reviewing stand at the Gate of Heavenly Peace, because there have been a lot of rumors swirling around about infighting at the top of the regime. And the rumors are essentially that Xi Jinping is losing influence and might even be deposed. Now, I think that there is something to these rumors because we wouldn't be hearing all of this if it weren't for stability. And also, there's some objective signs that shows that Xi Jinping's in trouble. But I think Xi will still be on the reviewing stand on the 3rd. And the reason is I don't believe the party has yet come to a determination as to who is going to replace him. So anyway, eyes will be on the order of people watching this parade from the Gate of Heavenly Peace.
A few questions here, because obviously it's very difficult to get news out of China. I know you've mentioned in the past it's so opaque. But where are you hearing this from? Obviously, you have inner sources, Gordon, that he's in trouble here.
Yes, well, you're hearing from people who just are China watchers. And also, the objective signs, I think, are the most concerning. And let me just give you an example. General He Weidong, the number 2 uniformed military officer, has not been seen in public since March 11th. Now, he is known to be Xi Jinping's #1 loyalist, the hatchet man. Now, a lot of people say, well, Xi Jinping got rid of his own guy. That's entirely possible. But it's more likely that Xi Jinping's adversaries in the military got rid of General He. And the reason is this. Since July 9th of last year, in PLA Daily, which is the main propaganda organ of the Chinese military, they've been running articles praising quote-unquote collective leadership. Now, that's a direct slap at Xi Jinping's one-man style of rule. We know that these articles have been written by people, military officers, who are aligned with the #1 uniformed officer, General Zhang Yaoshao, who is known to be not on great terms with Xi Jinping. Now, General Chang is the vice chairman, #1 vice chairman of the Central Military Commission. And so, we see Xi Jinping loyalists disappearing. So there is more than just a possibility that Xi Jinping isn't getting rid of his own people, that Xi Jinping's adversaries are getting rid of Xi Jinping's people. And so that's an ill indication that Xi Jinping is having trouble in the military.
What do you make of Putin's presence? Obviously, we saw his meeting with Trump. Now he's in China. What is the message to the world here? that he
Well,
wants to jump back in the game here?
Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have been as thick as thieves for a very long time. And they see their interests in the same way, and they identify the same enemy, which is the United States.
Mhm.
And it is, a lot of people will say, well, Trump's trying to engineer a reverse Nixon. In other words, to pry the Russians away from the Chinese. And while that might be theoretically possible, I think it's really, really difficult because Putin right now, his number one goal is to annex Ukraine. He can't do that without China's help. As a matter of fact, I don't think Russia would be fighting today if it weren't for all-in Chinese support. So Putin, and no matter what he says to President Trump or others, is going to be listening to the Chinese with a much more attentive ear than anybody else. And we have seen, I believe, a hardening of the ties among Russia, North Korea, and China. So I don't think that the U.S. is in any position right now to break that troika apart, except the one thing we can do, we can starve the Russian war machine. And if we do that, then of course we break it apart because Putin could be out of power.
Well, I'm going to ask about the likelihood of that because I saw the clip where Trump spoke about China willing to denuclearize. I believe you think we see more of a chance of Russia agreeing to some sort of arms deal.
Well, the Chinese, just 2 days after Trump said that on Monday,
Mhm.
that China might denuclearize. Well, on Wednesday, we saw statements saying China will not participate in any denuclearization talks
Yeah,
with the United States and Russia. By denuclearization, I think Trump meant arms control. I don't think he meant complete disarmament, which is what implies. But in any event, China has been resistant, really resistant over the course of years about arms control talks with the United States or with anybody for that matter. So it was, I think, unrealistic to think that we can do it, get them to the table. Even if we could, it would take years to negotiate a deal because the Chinese are not going to agree to verification. And that's
but
exactly what you need for a deal of that sort.
getting back to this trifecta, right, of Kim Jong Un, Putin, and Xi, what does that mean for the U.S., Gordon?
Well,
How,
it means that the world has divided, that we cannot separate them except by defeating them. And we have to get realistic and have to understand that now's the time for us to have closer relationships with our friends, work more closely. I know this
right?
is not a message that Americans want to hear, but attempts by everybody to try to negotiate and work with, all three of these, none of that has worked. So, for instance, President Trump should know that his North Korean diplomacy, which was very generous, very sort of broad-minded, it completely failed. And it's not going to work this time, especially because the Chinese are more arrogant right now. The Russians are more needy. And the North Koreans are in a really good position because they've been selling short-range ballistic missiles, artillery shells to Russia, as well as providing soldiers.
So keeping your enemies closer is not working. Let me just throw out a crazy scenario. What happens, and obviously it's not happening, but what happens if Trump were to attend that September 3rd event?
That would be disgraceful. Um, First of all, the Chinese narrative is that they beat the Japanese in World War II. They completely ignore America's contribution. And we should not be participating in their propaganda exercises. Also, as a practical matter, this would make life really difficult for the United States because the Chinese are already telling people that they own Trump, that Trump is subordinate to them, and that the United States is finished. Now, I don't think Trump believes that he is submissive to the Chinese. I don't think we are, but that doesn't matter. What matters, Daniela, is what the Chinese think, because what the Chinese think will determine the way they act. And that will make the Chinese even more aggressive, because here you have President Trump acknowledging China's narrative on World War II, traveling halfway around the world to China, just like in centuries ago where you had foreign envoys going to Beijing to show that they were vassals to the Grand Celestial Court. I don't think any American president should go to Beijing as long as the Communist Party rules. This is not good for us. This is going to make life very difficult for the US. Trump, one other thing, if I may, Trump doesn't understand the value of information warfare. He's gutted Voice of America, got rid of Radio Free Asia. The Chinese believe in this very, very much, and they're succeeding. And if we want to see how information warfare matters, we now have the world supporting Hamas against Israel. I mean, that shows you the value of information warfare. And we are on the wrong end of China's information warfare campaign.
How far ahead is China in the AI race?
Not far ahead at all, because the AI race depends upon chips, and China needs American chips. We found this out a couple of weeks ago when we saw those reports that the DeepSeek's R2 model was delayed because they were trying to rely on domestic chips, specifically Huawei's Ascend. And they really needed NVIDIA chips, which they, for various reasons, didn't get. So, there's a lot of hot air, and China has a lot of accomplishments, but unfortunately for the Chinese, semiconductors are critical, and they are far behind in this.
Last question, Gordon. I know our last talk went viral when you spoke that China, wants a war with the U.S. Do you still see this as unfolding and happening, and they still want to go to war with America?
Well, let me put it this way. I think that, Xi Jinping might be desperate, and he very well may be thinking, or somebody else in Beijing may be thinking, that a war would prevent them from being deposed. Because in a wartime scenario, you have to rally around the leader. So a war is very much in Xi Jinping's interest. But the other thing is, it's not so much the question of what the Chinese regime wants, but it's what the Chinese regime is doing. So we see these very dangerous military activities from South Korea in the north to Australia in the south. And if one of those spirals into a conflict, I don't think China can de-escalate. And it can't de-escalate because now, with the infighting, I don't even know if anyone can come to a decision. But also, in that type of situation, only the most hostile answers are considered to be acceptable. So I don't think China can de-escalate. I don't think it can deal constructively with the world. If one of these China-provoked incidents goes bad, there's going to be a war.
One last point, just on the trade deal. I know you've mentioned that China wants the trade deal. When you see this coming to some sort of conclusion here?
Only when we have some sort of clarity on what's happening inside the Chinese regime. I think that we haven't had a trade deal with China up to now because nobody has the authority to make the concessions that are necessary to have a deal, which is the reason why we're having pause after pause after pause. Normally, delays help China because it gives them more time to steal, more time to engage in predatory trade practices. This time, delay, I think, helps the U.S. because President Trump is stitching up these trade frameworks that tend to exclude China. So, for instance, the British deal, which gives tariff relief only for products that don't include components from hostile regimes. That's China. EU deal, not good for China. So I think that the Chinese must realize this, but they are not in a position to come to terms with us.
Gordon Chang, it's always great catching up with you. Come back soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniela.
And thank you all for watching. We'll have more great content. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. Just keeps us going. That's it for me. We'll see you soon.